The best way to prepare for your own death is to get bored of living. Empress Ashana had cultivated a state of profound ennui that most sentient species only achieved in cautionary tales. The condition had crept over her 6 months ago, after the assassin's blade, dulling her world to a listless gray. Every sunrise since felt less like a new beginning and more like a fresh, personal insult. She had ceased to feel pain, or anger, or even fear. All that remained was a suffocating listlessness, a helplessness born from a gilded cage that had suddenly become a tomb. The stagnant heat of her imperial chambers pressed down, carrying the scent of superheated dust and recycled breath. She lay on a silken chase, her fingers tracing the one thing in her life that still felt real: the scar. It was a ruinous, biomechanical seam that started at her left temple, sliced down across her cheekbone, and vanished into the high collar of her ceremonial robes, continuing its ugly path across her torso. A permanent monument of fused flesh and pale, fibrous wiring to her failure to be perfect. The symbol of her obsolescence. A soft chime echoed through the suite. Ashana didn't move. The door hissed open. "Your Majesty." Lord Regent Morian's tones were smooth, polished stones, each word perfectly rounded and utterly without warmth. He glided into the room, his expression a careful sculpture of polite concern, a look he had chiseled into his features over the last 6 months. "The technician has arrived." Ashana continued her lazy cartography of the scar on her face, her touch ghost-light. Let him wait. Morian cleared his throat, a sound like sand scouring metal. "To repair the environmental controls. Again." He let the final word hang in the stale air, a small, poisoned dart. "As I explained, our own engineering corps is dedicated to fleet readiness, a far more pressing matter of state. But I took the liberty of expediting a service request for myself. Found a contractor through Omnistellar Installations who specializes in recalcitrant systems." He paused, a corner of his mouth twitching in a barely suppressed smirk. "They assure me he gets results, if by somewhat uncultured methods. A human." The subtext was as subtle as a plasma cannon. "I picked this one for you. I brought this gutter dweller into your sacred space. See how far you've fallen." It was another calculated move in his long campaign to push her into the quiet irrelevance of abdication. Once, a jab like that would have earned him a month cleaning plasma conduits with his tongue. Now, she couldn't even summon the energy for a sigh. The door hissed open again, this time with more force, cutting short any reply she might have deigned to offer. A man stomped in, lugging a dented, graphite-colored toolkit that looked like it had survived atmospheric re-entry one too many times. He was dressed in a grease-stained jumpsuit, with an OSI patch on the shoulder, the fabric worn thin at the knees and elbows. His face, etched with lines of irritation, was a thundercloud of a man who was already 3 steps behind on his day. He stopped just inside the doorway, his eyes sweeping the room, his gaze sliding right over the Empress on her chaise, and the Lord Regent standing beside her as if they were furniture. He sniffed the air, his nose wrinkling in disgust. "Jesus," he muttered, his voice a low rasp, like a file on rusted metal. "It's like a damn sauna in here. Who sets the thermostat to swamp ass?" A pair of courtiers near the doorway gasped in perfect, horrified unison. Morian's left eye twitched, a barely perceptible tremor in his mask of condescending civility. He had wanted to provoke her, but even he seemed taken aback by the sheer, unvarnished crudity of his chosen instrument. And Ashana, for the first time in 183 days, felt something other than the crushing weight of her own uselessness. It was a flicker, a tiny spark of pure, unadulterated shock that momentarily burned away the gray fog in her mind. It was almost pleasant. The human, this technician, paid them no mind. He slapped a handheld scanner against a wall, grunted at the reading, then moved to the opposite wall and slapped it again. "There you are, you son of a bitch." He dropped his toolkit with a heavy clatter that echoed in the cavernous, silent room. He pried open a nearly invisible wall panel with a grunt of effort, revealing a nightmarish tangle of glowing fiber optics and lattices of silvery, nerve-like filaments. He stuck his head inside, a muffled stream of curses following, each one a small violation against the chamber's sanctity. The scene was so absurd, so utterly alien to the silent, suffocating reverence of her life, that Ashana found herself sitting up. The gray fog in her mind swirled, disturbed. Menial was treating the imperial suite of the Va'ash flagship like a backed-up toilet in a dockside cantina, and no one, not even the puffed-up Lord Regent, was stopping him. The human's anger became a tool in itself. He worked with a furious concentration, muttering a constant, vitriolic commentary to the machinery. "Who designed this? Seriously, you don't put the primary heat sink next to the damn coolant intake. That's not elegant design, it's just stupid, over-engineered bullshit." He reached in with a tool. "This bypass relay? Christ. If I didn't so much as looked at this thing funny, the whole system would cook itself." The question was pure, bitter sarcasm, aimed at the anonymous, long-dead engineer he was cursing. Morian stepped forward, his posture radiating condescending authority. "Technician, I must insist you maintain a level of decorum befitting—" "Hey, pal, zip it," the human grunted, not even bothering to look out from the wall cavity. "I'm trying to defuse this hairball of a capacitor before it flash fries the whole deck. You want to talk, fill out a form. Or wait till I'm done." Morian froze, his mouth slightly agape. He looked at Ashana, his expression a mixture of outrage and expectation. He was waiting for her to assert authority, to have this lout ejected into the starless gulf for his insolence. But Ashana was fascinated. She waved a dismissive hand, the gesture feeling heavier, more meaningful than it had in months. "Leave us, Morian. All of you." The Lord Regent's composure finally cracked. "Majesty, this is highly irregular. This commoner's presence is a security risk." "My comfort is a domestic triviality, is it not?" she asked, throwing his own words back at him. "Then allow me to manage my own trivialities. Go." Morian's jaw tightened. He bowed, a stiff, jerky motion, and swept from the room, herding the stunned courtiers before him like bewildered herdbeasts. The door hissed shut, leaving Ashana alone with the foul-mouthed human and the rhythmic clink and snap of his tools. She rose from the chase, her robes whispering against the polished floor, and glided toward him. He was still half buried in the wall, his backside the only part of invisible. "Technician," she began, her voice retaining its melodic, imperial cadence. She was testing him, prodding him. She wanted another spark, another jolt to prove the first hadn't been a fluke. "These chambers have been the seat of my family for 5 generations. They have witnessed the signing of treaties that shaped the galactic arm." "That's great," he grunted, his voice muffled. "Could you hand me that T-spanner? Blue one." She blinked, looking down at the chaotic mess of tools on the floor. She located the requested item and, feeling utterly ridiculous, handed it to his outstretched, grease-stained hand. "Thanks." She decided to try another approach, letting a deliberate tremor of sorrow enter her voice. She would offer him the tragedy that defined her, the story that broke courtiers and silenced councils. "They have also witnessed my fall. 6 months ago, in this very room, I was struck down. An assassin's blade. It left me changed." She touched the scar on her cheek, the gesture fluid from countless private rehearsals. She was laying the bait, expecting what she always got. Pity, averted eyes, uncomfortable platitudes. "This wound," she continued, her voice growing softer, more dramatic, "is a symbol of my failure, my loss of purpose. My people, they see me as broken. I am—" There was a loud, satisfying thump from inside the wall, followed by a triumphant, "Got it!" A glorious wave of cold, clean air washed over her. The oppressive heat vanished instantly, replaced by a refreshing chill. The environmental system whirred to life with a gentle, steady hum. The human pulled his head out of the wall. He had a smudge of black grease on his nose. He slammed the panel shut, the sound echoing her own shattered sentence. He grabbed his toolkit. Ashanathir stood there, stunned into silence. He hadn't heard a word. Or he hadn't cared. "Wait," she said, her voice rising with an unfamiliar fire. "I was speaking to you." He stopped at the door and turned, hoisting his toolkit onto his shoulder. "Look, lady, the condenser's recalibrated and I bypassed the faulty relay. It's fixed. I gotta sign out." The sheer, unadulterated indifference of it stole the air from her lungs. It was more shocking than the assassin's blade, because it was so mundane, so absolute. "I am Ashanathir, Empress of the Va'ash Dominion," she cried, words tearing from her throat, raw and full of a passion she thought had died. "My life has been shattered. People see me as a failure. I am adrift in a sea of despair. My reign a mockery. My very existence a—" He stopped. He turned back fully and looked at her. He really looked at her, his gaze sweeping from her jeweled diadem down to the hem of her robes, lingering for a fraction of a second on the pale, silver-wired scar. There was no pity in his eyes, no awe, no fear, just a bone-deep, cosmic-level annoyance. He took a breath, as if steeling himself to deal with a particularly difficult customer. Then he spoke the 3 words that detonated the placid, gray prison of her mind. "Not my problem." He turned and walked out. The door hissed shut, leaving Ashanathir standing in a gust of perfectly chilled air, the silence in the room profound and earth-shattering. For 3 days, the air in her chambers remained crisp and cold, a constant, clean-smelling reminder of the human. Ashanathir couldn't get his words out of her head. Not my problem. The phrase echoed, not as an insult, but as a bizarre kind of liberation. For 6 months, her problem had been everyone's problem. The council discussed it in hushed tones. The courtiers whispered about it behind their hands. Morian wielded it like a weapon. Her wound, her despair, her brokenness. It was a matter of state. But to this one, crude creature, it was nothing. It was just noise, a faulty condenser, a job ticket to be closed. A simmering, unfamiliar heat replaced the apathy. Indignation coiled in her gut. Fury sharpened the edges of her thoughts. A burning, obsessive curiosity propelled her from her chase. She paced, for the first time in months, her bare feet silent on the cold floor, arguing with his memory and composing scathing, brilliant retorts she would never deliver. She felt alive. Morian visited daily, his polite pressure mounting like a slow tide. He spoke of the Dominion's need for a strong, whole symbol. He presented holopads with draft after draft of her abdication speech, each one more poetic and final than the last. He was trying to bury her under a mountain of elegant prose. Today, he'd left a new version on her table. A graceful transition, he'd called it. Ashanathir looked down from the datapad to the smooth, seamless wall where the human had worked. An idea, wild and defiant, sparked in her mind. She strode to a display case containing ceremonial artifacts. Her hand closed around the hilt of a Va'ash letter opener. an ornate tool of state, crafted from carved xylosteel and edged with a focused energy field designed to slice through wax seals. She returned to the wall panel. She tried to pry it open as the human had, but her slender fingers found no purchase. It was sealed tight. Her frustration gave way to sharp resolve. A more direct approach was needed. She held the ceremonial opener, its blade humming with latent power. With a surge of energy that felt like waking from a long dream, she aimed the tip at the exact spot on the panel where she recalled seeing the bypass relay. She activated the blade. A sharp, blue spark erupted from the panel's surface. A fizzing sound, like water on hot metal, sizzled for a second, followed by the acrid smell of burnt circuitry. The gentle whir of the environmental system died. A slow, triumphant smile spread across Ashanathir's face. It was the first genuine smile to touch her lips since the attack. The air in the room, once again, began to grow warm. Miko Radek was back. If he'd been a thundercloud before, he was a full-blown hurricane now. He stormed into the Empress's chambers without waiting to be announced, his face a mask of pure, incandescent rage. Morian trailed in his wake, a smug, satisfied little smirk playing on his lips. This was exactly what he had hoped for. Further evidence of her unraveling. "You gotta be kidding me," Miko snarled, his voice echoing in the silent room. He didn't even glance at Ashanathir. He went straight for the panel, ripped it open with a metallic shriek, and shoved his diagnostic tool inside. The tool beeped once, a sad, final note. "Oh no," he said, his voice dangerously low. He pulled his head out of the wall, eyes blazing. "This wasn't a failure. This was sabotage. Someone zapped the primary bypass relay with a directed energy pulse, fried it to a crisp." He whirled around, a tool still clutched in his hand, and pointed a greasy finger directly at the Empress of the Vash Dominion. "You," he seethed. "You broke my goddamn fix, didn't ya?" The two Imperial guards flanking the doorway, statues a moment before, instantly became living weapons. Their hands snapped to the grips of their pulse rifles, the soft click of safeties disengaging the only sound in the charged air. Morian, standing beside them, gave a subtle, almost impersonable nod, a silent command. Permission granted. Morian spoke, his tone a silken thread pulled taut enough to cut. "Technician, you will address Her Majesty with the respect she is due, or my guards will—" "Stand down." Ashanathir's voice cut through the air like a shard of glass. It was not loud, but it resonated with an authority that hadn't been heard in that room for half a year. It was the voice of a commander, an empress, a ruler. The guards froze, caught between Morian's gesture and the iron of their empress's gaze. She was the one with the scar, the broken one, but the command in her voice was absolute. They chose the Empress. Their hands moved away from their rifles. Morian's smug expression faltered, replaced by a flicker of genuine shock. He had moved her like a pawn, never expecting the piece to command the board. Ashanathir met Miko's furious gaze, her own narrowing with a challenging glint. "Did I?" she asked, her voice a low murmur. "What do you mean, did I?" Miko shot back, his voice dripping with sarcasm. He took a step forward, completely unintimidated by the royal presence or the heavily armed guards. "Yeah, you did. I can see the damn scorch mark from here. What, you get bored? Decided to poke the guts of a multi-million credit environmental system with a stick just to see what would happen?" "Perhaps I found the temperature disagreeable," Ashanathir said, tilting her head. She was enjoying this. The fire in his eyes was reflected in her own. It was exhilarating. "Disagreeable? I set it to a perfect 22 Celsius. That's standard. You want it colder? You use the damn thermostat. You don't perform amateur electronic sabotage." I demand that you fix it, she said, her tone imperious.
Demand? Lady, you just voided the warranty. This is a rebuild now, not a repair. Osai's gonna charge your empire double for this, and I'm putting in for hazard pay. He gestured wildly around the opulent room. Working with unstable clients.
Morian stepped forward again, his composure regained.
Technician, that is enough. Her Majesty is not... well, this outburst is a symptom of her condition. We will, of course, compensate OSI for the damages.
He turned to Ashanathir, his voice softening to a patronizing coo.
Your Majesty, please. This is unseemly. Let the man work. We can discuss your future later.
He is not the man, Ashanathir snapped, her eyes never leaving Miko's. He is a singularly infuriating creature, and I have found him interesting. She looked back at Miko. You will not be leaving. I require your services. Miko let out a bark of incredulous laughter.
Oh, great. That's just fantastic. Now you're gonna get me fired. First you break the gear, then you get me canned for insubordination. You're trying to ruin my life because you're bored, aren't you? Typical top-floor bullshit.
And what is your omnistellar installation salary? She asked, ignoring the insult, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across her lips. It was a predator smile. Miko was taken aback by the question.
What?
Your salary. The credits they pay you to endure people like me. Tell me. He stared at her, then glanced at Morian, whose face was a thunderous mask of outrage. A spark of pure, unadulterated spite lit up in Miko's eyes.
75,000 credits a year, plus benefits.
I will pay you that salary, I will double it, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush that filled the entire room. For the rest of your natural life. The only sound was the faint hum of the ship's systems. The guards shifted their weight. Morian looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. Miko just stared at her, his anger finally draining away, replaced by stunned disbelief.
What's the catch?
He asked, his voice barely a whisper. The catch, she said, her smile widening, is that as of this moment, you are no longer a technician. You are my companion, my consultant. You will show me your world. I wish to see the forge that created such an infuriatingly resilient man. Miko was floored. He looked from her challenging gaze to Morian's apoplectic face. He saw the fury, the loss of control, the sheer humiliation radiating from the Lord Regent, and a spiteful, shit-eating grin of his own touched his lips.
All right, he said slowly. Fine. We have a deal.
He did something then that Ashanathir had only ever read about in xenocultural briefs on archaic customs. He spit into his palm. He held the damp hand out to her. The entire room recoiled. Morian looked like he was going to be physically ill. He made a strangled noise.
Your Majesty, don't! The filth! The gesture is meaningless.
His horror was not of a broken taboo, but of a deep, personal, class-based revulsion. The thought of his perfect porcelain Empress touching this grease-stained off-worlder was anathema to him. Ashanathir looked at the hand. She looked at Miko's defiant expression. She looked at Morian's horror. With a deliberation that was an act of war, she raised her own hand, brought it to her lips, and mirrored his gesture before clasping his hand. Their hands met. It was warm and strange, and absolutely final. Behind them, Morian's face shifted from horror to something else. A new, cold calculation. He leaned over and whispered to his aide.
his voice a venomous hiss. Let her go. Alert security to stand down. Let the entire Dominion see her cavorting with this filthy menial. She is writing her own abdication speech. All right, let's go, Miko said, wiping his palm on his jumpsuit the moment their hands unclasped. My ride off this station leaves in 20 minutes. Ashanathir blinked. My ride? Yeah, the OSI cargo hauler. A sturdy beast. Not exactly a royal chariot, but it's headed for the Sol system. So, try to keep up, Your Highness. He grabbed his toolkit. The transition from political theater to frantic escape was instantaneous and dizzying. Morian's guards, now following his new silent orders, had melted away, leaving the path to the main concourse clear. But Ashanathir knew it was a trap. Not that way, she hissed, grabbing Miko's arm. He'll have the main transit hubs monitored. He wants us to be seen. She pulled him toward a nondescript service panel. With a touch, it slid open, revealing a dark, dusty corridor humming with the low thrum of the flagship's life support. This way. They plunged into a tense, hurried flight through the guts of the ship she had once called home. Ashanathir, who had spent her youth exploring these forbidden passages out of royal boredom, navigated them with an instinct she'd thought long lost. She directed them through cramped service crawlways, across narrow catwalks spanning humming power conduits, and through forgotten storage bays filled with the ghosts of past reigns. Left here, she'd whisper, the sound swallowed by the thrum of machinery. The old hydro spanners are stored 2 levels down. No one's been in there in a century. Gotta slice this checkpoint, Miko would mutter, jamming a low-level OSI access card into a security terminal. He'd type furiously, cursing the Va'ash Baroque security safeguards. Their architecture's a nightmare. Redundant, stupid. Come on, you bastard. Got it. A heavy blast door would slide open with a groan of protest, and they'd slip through into another dimly lit service corridor. It was a clumsy, exhilarating partnership. Her forgotten knowledge, his practical skills. They were a 2-person insurgency against the pristine order of the ship. They burst out into the echoing, cavernous main cargo bay, just as a synthesized voice announced, "Final boarding call for OSI freighter Sturdy Beast. Destination, Sol Gateway Station." The freighter was a hulking, ugly ship, its hull plating scarred and stained with the residue of 1,000 different atmospheres. Its ramp was halfway up. "That's us!" Miko yelled, breaking into a run. Ashanathir, hampered by her heavy ceremonial robes, struggled to keep pace. Without a second thought, she gathered the priceless, hand-woven fabric in her fists and ripped it at the knee, freeing her legs. She sprinted after him, the torn silk fluttering behind her like a battle standard. They scrambled up the groaning metal ramp moments before it sealed shut with a deafening hydraulic hiss. They stumbled into the hold, gasping for breath, the air thick with the smell of engine grease, ionized air, and faintly of livestock from a previous run. They had done it. They were off the flagship. Ashanathir leaned against a cargo container, her heart hammering in her chest, not with fear, but with a wild, triumphant joy. They were free. The inside of the sturdy beast was as ugly as its exterior. The small passenger cabin, clearly an afterthought, consisted of 2 worn-out acceleration couches, a flickering light panel, and a viewport that looked out onto the bulkhead of a cargo container. The jump to hyperspace was a violent, gut-wrenching lurch. Ashanathir was pressed deep into her couch, her knuckles white where she gripped the armrests. The grandeur of her escape had evaporated, replaced by the grim, vibrating reality of interstellar freight travel. "You okay back there, Your Highness?" Miko's voice was strained. He was fiddling with a control panel, trying to coax the nutrient dispenser into producing something other than a thin, gray paste. "I am processing," she said through a clenched jaw.
This vessel feels unstable.
She's a working freighter, he grunted, giving up on the dispenser and flopping into the other couch. She's built to haul things, not people. But she's reliable, gets you from A to B without asking questions, and more importantly, without logging detailed passenger manifests on public networks.
A silence settled between them, filled only by the low hum of the engines. They were truly alone now, adrift between worlds. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a strange vacuum in its place. "So," she began, barely a whisper. "Earth, what is it like?" Miko scrubbed a hand over his face, looking tired.
It's a mess. Crowded, loud, dirty. The weather's terrible. Politics are a joke. It's great. You'll hate it.
He looked over at her, his expression softening for a fraction of a second.
We're heading to my home city, Boston. It's one of the old ones, full of brick and history, and people who will tell you to go screw yourself if you look at them wrong.
"You seem fond of it," she observed.
It's home, he said with a shrug,
as if that explained everything.
It's real. Things are old, things are broken. People patch them up and keep going. Up there,
he jerked a thumb in the general direction of the Va'ash Dominion.
Everything's gotta be perfect, or gets thrown on the scrap heap.
He had, without meaning to, perfectly summarized her entire existence. She was the thing on the scrap heap. "I have no resources," she said suddenly, the practical reality of her situation crashing down on her. "I am entirely dependent on you." The admission was humiliating.
Yeah, well, that's the deal, right?
He said, not unkindly.
You're my problem now, I guess.
He looked away, out the viewport at the unmoving bulkhead.
We'll figure it out. First things first, we gotta get you some real clothes. You stick out like a sore thumb in those space pajamas.
She looked down at her torn, priceless silk robes. She saw them now as a costume, a liability, no longer a symbol of her status. She nodded slowly. "A disguise. I understand." He was already her advisor, her consultant, and she was already learning. The north end of Boston in late December was a full frontal assault on the senses. Ashanathir, now wrapped in a thick, ridiculously puffy winter coat, felt utterly overwhelmed. The air was frigid and carried 1,000 smells at once. Roasting nuts, exhaust fumes, baking bread. Something sharp and green she later learned was pine. The streets were a chaotic river of people bundled in colorful fabrics, their faces lit by the gaudy, festive lights strung between brick buildings. Miko, by contrast, was in his element. He navigated the crowded sidewalks with a grumpy, purposeful confidence, a rock in the turbulent human stream.
"Come on, this way,"
he grumbled, pulling her by the sleeve of her new, alien-feeling coat.
"Gotta get you a cannoli. It's essential."
He led her into a small, brightly lit bakery. The warmth and the smell of sugar and fried dough were staggering. A line of people snaked from a long glass counter, filled with an overwhelming variety of pastries.
It's fried dough, basically a tube of it, filled with the sweet ricotta cheese, he explained, shouting over the din. It'll probably kill you. Your fancy alien guts can't handle it. But it's worth it. Get two.
When they finally reached the counter, he ordered for them in rapid-fire dialect of the local language that Ashanathir could barely parse. A moment later, a woman handed her a crisp, tubular pastry dusted with powdered sugar. She stared at it, a marvel of delightfully impractical, delicious-smelling engineering. She took a tentative bite. The shell shattered with an explosive crunch. The filling, cool, sweet, creamy, with a hint of citrus, flooded her senses. It was a riot, An explosion unlike the refined, single-note nutrient pastes or the delicate floral confections of the imperial court. She devoured it in 4 large, graceless bites, getting a smear of powdered sugar on the tip of her nose. She looked up to see Miko watching her, a smirk playing on his lips. For a moment, his perpetually annoyed facade cracked, revealing a man watching someone experience pure, uncomplicated joy. He looked away quickly, a faint flush on his cheeks.
"Told ya,"
he grumbled, taking a large bite of his own. Their next stop was a department store, a cacophony of music, announcements, and clashing colors. Miko was determined to get her a more practical coat than the puffy one she wore.
"No, absolutely not."
Ashanathir held up a sleek, black designer coat. "But the lines are elegant. The material is flawless."
"It's crap,"
Miko said, snatching it from her. He flicked the fabric.
"This stuff rips, you throw it away. There's no character to it, it's just new."
He grabbed a heavy, dark green jacket off a nearby rack. It was made of a thick, sturdy canvas.
This is a real jacket. Gets a hole, you patch it. It gets stained, it adds character. You see the stitching? It's made to endure."
Frustrated by the illogical sizing and overwhelming choices, Ashanathir finally threw a different coat back on the rack. She muttered under her breath, a perfectly enunciated, regal whisper of pure frustration. "This is absolute bullshit." Miko, who had been examining a pair of gloves, stopped dead. He turned to her slowly, a look of profound shock on his face. An incredulous grin began to spread across his features.
"Did you just—"
She glared at him, a hot blush creeping up her neck from the collar of the ridiculously puffy coat. But beneath the embarrassment, she felt a spark of defiant, wicked triumph. "Fine," she conceded, grabbing the sturdy canvas jacket he'd chosen. "This one." They went to the checkout counter. Miko tapped his OSI credit chip against the payment terminal. A red light blinked. A negative buzz sounded. Payment declined.
"What the hell?"
Miko muttered. He tried again. Same result. He pulled out his personal datapad, his brow furrowed in annoyance. He tapped at the screen for a second, his expression darkening.
"Son of a bitch,"
he whispered. He turned the screen so she could see it. It was an official notice from OSI corporate accounts. Contractor M. Raddick. All assets and credit lines frozen pending contractual review and inquiry into unauthorized transport of foreign national. Tracking flag placed on chip ID 861 OSI 4C2 at point of sale Sol 3, Boston Commerce Sector. The message was brutally clear. Morian was watching. He hadn't just let them go. He'd tracked them. And now he was squeezing. They were cut off, stranded on this backwater world, with nothing but the physical paper cash that Miko had in his wallet. The Lord Regent's threat was active, his reach long. To escape the crushing holiday crowds and the sudden, chilling paranoia of being watched, Miko led her away from the shopping district, down a wide, park-like path alongside a vast frozen river. The Charles River Esplanade, he called it. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet that reflected off the ice. It was quiet here, the city's roar muffled by snow-covered trees. The canvas jacket was warmer than she'd expected.
"So, this scar,"
he said, breaking the comfortable silence. His voice was softer than she'd ever heard it.
"That's what this is all about, right? The abdication, the running away, the whole drama."
She stopped, looking out over the frozen expanse. "In my culture, strength is in form, perfection. A leader is a symbol, a flawless icon. My scar, it made me a failure, a broken symbol." She touched her cheek, the metallic tracery cold against her fingertips. I felt discarded, like a beautiful vase that had been shattered. Useless. He was silent for a long moment. She expected a clumsy attempt at reassurance.
Yeah, you're a mess,
he said finally. His crude honesty was, as always, both shocking and strangely comforting.
I'm a mess. This whole goddamn city is a mess. Look at it.
He gestured to the skyline, with its mix of ancient brick and glass-skinned modern towers.
That's life. You get a dent, you don't throw the whole damn thing out. You break, you patch it up, and you keep going.
His words, so simple and unpoetic, hit her with more force than any of Morian's courtly speeches. You patch it up, and you keep going. It was the philosophy of the canvas jacket. It was the philosophy of this loud, messy, resilient species. It was the seed of a new way of thinking, a way to see her scar as a patch, a new beginning. It was Christmas Eve. The concept was bizarre to Ashanathir, an entire holiday predicated on peace, family, and the giving of gifts, celebrated in the dead of winter. Miko's apartment in the North End was small, almost claustrophobically so after the cavernous halls of her flagship. It was cluttered with tools, schematics, and the comfortable mess of a life lived alone. He had, however, made an effort. A small, slightly lopsided pine tree stood in the corner, adorned with a single string of multicolored lights. The air was filled with the smell of garlic, lemon, and sizzling seafood.
It's an old tradition, he explained, gesturing with a wine-stained wooden spoon. An Italian-American thing. You're supposed to have a whole mess of different kinds of seafood. I think I got 4, maybe 5 if you count the canned anchovies. Had to pay cash, so I was on a budget.
Ashanathir watched, fascinated, as he darted around the tiny kitchen, a space clearly designed for one person. He was attempting to cook multiple dishes on a 2-burner stove with the same singular concentration she recognized from when he'd been fixing her environmental controls. "You're going to burn the shrimp," she pointed out, her tone analytical.
"I'm searing it," he shot back without looking. "It's a technique."
"The garlic is turning brown. It will be bitter."
"It's fine. It's called flavor."
She stepped into the kitchen to get a closer look. He turned and they collided, a clumsy dance of elbows and hips. For a moment, they were pressed together, the heat of the stove between them, the smell of garlic and wine all around them. He smelled like salt and cold air, and something uniquely, undefinably him. State dinners were performances. This was just food. Awkward silences hung between them, broken only by the clink of forks, but it felt wonderfully real. After the meal, he handed her a clumsily wrapped package. Inside was a cheap glass snow globe. She shook it, and a flurry of white plastic flakes swirled around in a miniature, garishly painted Boston skyline.
"So you can remember what a real city looks like," he said, his voice gruff, his eyes fixed on his plate.
The unspoken thought, "when you leave," landed between them with the weight of a future she didn't want to consider. The tension that had been simmering between them for days, a low hum beneath the bickering and the culture shock, finally reached its breaking point. They were cleaning up, a domestic ritual so alien to Ashanathir she found it strangely intimate. She was washing, he was drying. The small kitchen forced them into a proximity that was both awkward and electric. She handed him a wet plate, their fingers brushing. The contact was like a spark jumping a gap. They both froze. He took the plate, his movements slow, deliberate. He set it down. When he turned back, she was still there, trapped between him and the sink, the soft, colored lights of the tree catching the metallic sheen of her scar. She wasn't hiding it. She hadn't tried to cover it with makeup or her hair. It was just there, part of her face. "You know," she said, her voice barely a whisper over the faint hum of the refrigerator. For a crude, foul-mouthed, infuriatingly stubborn off-worlder. She took a small step closer. You are not entirely unpleasant.
Yeah, well,
he said, his own voice rough with an emotion he couldn't name. He could feel the heat radiating from her skin. For a bossy, high-maintenance, knows-everything space queen, you're not so bad yourself. He leaned in, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. She met him halfway, her eyes fluttering shut. The kiss was hungry and desperate, a necessary raw explosion that released all the pent-up frustration and loneliness and burgeoning, terrifying affection. It was his calloused hands tangling in her silky hair, and her regal fingers gripping the rough fabric of his shirt. It was messy and passionate, and in its own chaotic way, absolutely perfect. The morning light filtering through the blinds was soft, painting stripes across the tangled sheets. For the first time Miko could remember, he woke up feeling content. Ashanathyr was asleep beside him, her head on his chest, one arm thrown possessively across his torso. Her breathing was a steady, quiet rhythm against his ribs. The silver tracery of her scar caught the light, and he thought it was beautiful. He was, he realized with a jolt of profound shock, happy. This complicated, infuriating, magnificent woman had crashed into his simple life and turned it upside fucking down, and he was happy about it. Then, a sharp, intrusive chime, the official OSI priority alert tone, blared from his datapad on the nightstand. A holographic message popped up, a pre-recorded, system-wide broadcast pushed through the OSI network to every device registered to him. Lord Regent Morian's face appeared, life-sized and furious, in the middle of the bedroom. His image flickered slightly, a sign of a broadcast pushed across a vast distance. "Your Majesty." Morian's voice was pure ice, each word a frozen shard. He sneered. "I trust you enjoyed your cultural exchange. The Council has seen the tracking data from your pet's credit chip. We know where you are. We know what you are." Ashanathyr sat bolt upright, pulling the sheet with her. Her face, which had been soft with sleep, was now pale and taut. Morian continued, his voice dripping with condescending triumph. "The Regency Council has voted, unanimously. Your unauthorized excursion is over. An Imperial shuttle has been dispatched to your location. You are to return immediately, to be formally decommissioned. Your human pet will be dealt with for kidnapping and treason against the Dominion." The recording ended, and the image vanished, leaving a lingering chill in the air. Miko's newfound contentment shattered into a million pieces.
"Dealt with? Decommissioned? What the hell does that mean?"
he demanded, his voice a low growl. Ashanathyr's eyes were wide, with a familiar, haunted fear he hadn't seen since that first day in her chambers. "Decommissioning," she whispered, voice trembling, "is civic death. I will be stripped of my title, my name, my lineage. My existence will be erased from all Imperial records. I will be exiled to the penal colony of Leith. I will become a ghost, a non-person." The political game, the romantic adventure, had collapsed into a terrifyingly real threat. They intended to erase her. Ashanathyr's first instinct was to shrink back, to retreat into the shell of the broken Empress. Fear, cold and paralyzing, washed over her. It was over. He had won. But Miko was all coiled fury and immediate action. He was already out of bed, pulling on his pants, his mind racing. "Like hell," he snarled, pacing the small bedroom. "Like
absolute hell. Are you kidding me? You're gonna let that slick-haired, pencil-pushing son of a bitch do that to you?
He stopped and turned to face her, his eyes blazing.
This is the woman who broke her own goddamn air conditioner out of spite. The one who spit in her hand and shook on a deal with a grease monkey in front of her whole snotty court. Are you gonna let him win?
His belief in the defiant, stubborn woman he'd come to know, not the Empress she had been, was a jolt to her system, a defibrillator for her failing courage. The fire he had sparked in her flared back to life, white-hot and raging. "No," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "No, I am not." They boarded the Imperial shuttle Morian had sent, a mirror-polished, sterile craft that felt like a prisoner transport. 2 silent, imposing guards stood by the door. They boarded with purpose, a desperate plan forming between them. "He's locked me out," Ashanathir fumed, pacing the small cabin as the shuttle ascended into the gray Boston sky. "My Imperial credentials, my access to the primary government networks, the fleet comms, all revoked. I can't prove his treason. It's my word against the entire Regency Council's." Miko was staring at a service panel near the floor, his mechanic's brain churning.
"Forget the new stuff,"
he said, thinking out loud.
"The new stuff's all firewalls and encryptions and passwords. What about the old stuff? The crap they don't bother with anymore?"
Ashanathir stopped pacing. "What are you talking about?"
"When you install a new system," he explained, tapping the panel with his knuckle, "you never ever rip out the old one completely. It's too much work. You just disconnect it, build the new system on top of it. But the old wires, the old diagnostic ports, they're always still there. Dead ends, forgotten."
He looked up at her, a glimmer of an idea in his eye.
"You got any of those on your flagship? Any old, dusty, forgotten systems nobody's thought about in 50 years?
Ashanathir's eyes widened. A memory surfaced, from her childhood lessons on Imperial history with a stuffy old tutor. A system decommissioned generations ago, deemed obsolete. "The old Royal Emergency Communication System," she whispered. "It's archaic. Slower than light, it runs on dedicated, hardwired conduits directly connected to the deep archives in the ship's core for redundancy. A physical data conduit. A back door." A slow, predatory smile touched her lips. He would never think to check it. He's too enamored with his own modern, elegant technology. She had her weapon. It was old, clunky, and completely overlooked. It was perfect. They were escorted directly to the throne room. The throne room was a theater of power, designed not for comfort, but for intimidation. A space of unforgiving angles, dark metal, and cold grandeur. Morian sat not on the throne itself, but on a slightly lower, yet still commanding chair placed before it. The entire Regency Council was assembled, a gallery of stern, judgmental faces ready to rubber stamp Ashanathir's political execution. Miko, standing beside her, felt 100 pairs of unblinking, jet-black eyes on him. He gave them his best, unimpressed Boston glare right back. Morian rose as they entered the center of the room. He began his speech, his voice resonating with what he clearly believed was patriotic fervor. He spoke of the Va'ash Dominion at a crossroads, weakened by a symbol of imperfection. He painted Ashanathir as a liability, a wound on the state, that needed to be cauterized for the good of all.
"The monarchy has made us stagnant," he declared, his voice ringing with twisted sincerity. "It has tied our strength to the frailties of flesh and blood. For the Dominion to evolve, to become truly strong, it must be freed from such sentiment. Empress Ashanathir's abdication marks a necessary, noble beginning for our evolution."
Ashanathir let him finish. She let the expectant quiet hang in the air, every eye in the chamber fixed upon her. Then she spoke. Her voice, clear and ringing with an absolute, unshakable power she had reclaimed, filled the vast chamber. She didn't refute his points. She didn't argue. She embraced them. "Lord Regent Morian is correct," she began, and a murmur of surprise went through the council. Morian's lips quirked in a triumphant smile. "I am wounded. I am flawed." She touched her scar, no longer with shame, but with a kind of ownership. "For months, I believed this made me weak. I believed the doctrine that had guided us for centuries, that strength is in perfection, in an unblemished form." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the faces of council members. "I was wrong. The core philosophy of this dominion is a lie." A collective gasp. She was committing heresy. "I have learned a scar as a reminder of survival. True strength is the will to mend what is broken and carry on." She glanced at Miko. He gave her a tiny, almost impersonable nod, his face bursting with pride. "The Va'ash Dominion needs a leader who understands what it is to be broken, one who knows how to be fixed. Not a perfect, static monument on a throne," she declared, her voice rising with passion. Morian's face was a mask of cold fury. His carefully constructed narrative was crumbling. He had expected a broken victim. He was facing a defiant queen. He played his final card. "This is madness. The human has corrupted her mind. She is unfit to rule," he roared, pointing a trembling finger at Ashana Thir. "Captain of the guard, arrest this woman. She is a danger to the state." The captain, a towering Va'ash with a face like etched granite, stepped forward. He looked at Morian, his de facto leader for months. Then he looked at Ashana Thir. He and his guards had seen her fire, heard her command. But Morian was acting the head of state. "Lord Regent," the captain's voice was a low grumble. "The evidence of her instability is compelling, but the charge of treason is extreme. The guard will await the council's final judgment before taking an Empress into custody." It was a tense, calculated neutrality. A standoff. Morian's face purpled with rage. The hesitation gave Ashana Thir the opening she needed. "My royal consort," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerously calm level as she gestured to Miko. "He has corrupted nothing." The council erupted in shocked uproar. Miko's eyes went wide. "Consort? We didn't discuss that part," he muttered under his breath. "And my first act as the restored, ruling Empress of this dominion," Ashana Thir announced, silencing the room, "is to present evidence on a matter of high treason." She tapped the datapad she held. On the massive view screen behind the throne, a crude, text-based interface appeared. Lines of archaic code scrolled rapidly. Ashana Thir looked at Miko. "I have access to the raw data logs from the Deep Archive, but it is a flood." Miko stepped forward, his eyes scanning the cascading lines of text and numbers. It was gibberish to the council, but to a technician used to reading raw diagnostics, it was language. "Hold on, stop there," he said, pointing. "Scroll back. See those data packets? Those are financial transfer authorizations. Big ones. And they're not going to fleet suppliers or government accounts. Look at the designation routing code. It's a shell corporation, registered in the Idrani Expanse. Look at the dates. They all coincide with major military budget approvals." He looked at Ashana Thir, then at the council. "He's been robbing you blind for years to fund this," Miko said, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. The evidence was cold, hard, irrefutable numbers, not a decrypted diary entry. Financial treason. The council members were on their feet, shouting, pointing. Morian stood frozen, his face ashen. His smug confidence shattered into a million pieces. "Lord Regent Morian, Ashanathir said, her voice as cold and vast as the space between stars. Your service to this dominion is concluded. She looked to the captain of the guard. Arrest this traitor. This time, the captain did not hesitate. He and his guard seized a sputtering, defeated Morian and dragged him from the throne room. Ashanathir had won. Weeks later, Ashanathir stood on the observation deck of the flagship. The room, once as sterile and cold as her old life, had been transformed. Potted ferns and strange, vibrant earth-based flowering plants were scattered about. The lighting was warmer. A comfortable-looking sofa had replaced a set of ceremonial chairs. It felt less like the command center of an empire, and more like a home. The door hissed open and Miko walked in, holding 2 steaming mugs. He was dressed in a simple pair of dark pants and a soft, gray sweater. He looked completely, utterly at home.
Figured you might need this,
he said, handing her a mug. It was coffee, strong and black.
Big day. We're forming a 10,000-year-old galactic empire before breakfast. Sounds stressful.
She took a sip, the bitter, hot liquid a welcoming jolt. The council is resistant, she admitted. Generations of tradition are not easily unwritten. They will learn, though. She looked out at the stars, then back at him. The gray fog still settles sometimes, when the room is too quiet. But now I know how to make it burn away.
You'll whip 'em into shape,
he said with easy confidence. He leaned against the viewport beside her, their shoulders touching.
So, what's next for us? Am I stuck wearing a tiara and waving in parades? 'Cause I'm not sure that's in my skill set.
Ashanathir laughed, a real, genuine laugh that echoed in the quiet room. Your official title, I've decided, is Chief Royal Advisor on not being a pompous asshole. Your duties will be extensive. She turned to him, her expression softening, her eyes full of a deep, abiding love that still felt new and breathtaking. My duty is here. This is my home, my people. She looked out at the swirling starfield. But I was thinking, the Dominion could use a new embassy, a permanent outpost for interspecies diplomacy, somewhere with character, somewhere with good cannoli. His eyes lit up, a slow grin spreading across his face.
You're not serious.
The Bostonian embassy of the Va'ash Dominion has a certain ring to it, don't you think? She teased, her eyes sparkling. We could base it out of a 3-decker in Dorchester. Very authentic. He laughed and wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her close.
You drive a hard bargain, Empress.
I learned from the best, she murmured, leaning her head against his shoulder. They stood there together, looking out at the endless expanse of stars. He had been a cynical mechanic. She had been a broken empress. Together, they became partners, a bickering, chaotic, improbable pair from opposite ends of the galaxy. They had found their place, ready to build a future that was patched together, chaotic, and entirely their own.